Going.
Yeah.
All right. This podcast is a little bit different because it's not going to be the funniest, and I'm not interviewing anybody. It's kind of awkward. I'm just sitting here talking. Rye Face is next to me.
I'm just hanging out.
Ryan's the only person who works with me / for me who knew me before I got sober, right?
Yeah.
Nobody else.
Yes.
Everybody else has become a friend and or employee in the last 3 years. I'll be 3 years sober on Saturday. I'm assuming most people will be listening to this either right before then or right after or the day of. May 28th will be 3 years of sobriety. Back in February, I made a Facebook post talking about how I was going to do a sobriety podcast. I think I was right around 1,000 days sober then, which is why I was going to do it. When I got all the questions and comments and DMs from it, my anxiety got kind of bad. It made me remember a lot of the things I've done in the past and kind of put me in a weird funk. So it wasn't the right time to do the podcast. This is long overdue. 3 months later, 3 or 4 months later, basically all I'm going to do is share my story. A lot of people know bits and pieces of what I've gone through. I've never really gone into detail or kind of shared what my life has been like as far as addiction and alcohol are concerned from start to finish or start till now. So I'm just going to start talking. Ryan, if you can think of anything important to add, go for it. This is weird, just me talking, but
yeah, it's all right.
It is what it is. I started drinking in the 6th grade. My best friend had older brothers who were in high school who liked to party. And so when they would have house parties, we would stay. So I started drinking in the 6th grade. In middle school, I was that person that would steal alcohol bottles and bring them to parties. Kept drinking through middle school. I never really got into trouble when I was that age. It was kind of freshman and sophomore year of high school. I started getting like the MIPs, intoxicated minor, stuff like that. And all that really happened with that is I would, get busted at a party or be in a car with people who were drinking or anything like that. And they would just give you like a citation and you would have to go to juvie and do community service. So there wasn't a lot of punishment for any of that. And my dad was always very lenient. I started using cocaine when I was 15. I did it for the first time because I hung out with older people who would do it. I never got addicted to drugs probably until I was 16 or 17. I kind of just dabbled for a while. I started to get into a lot of trouble in high school with having parties and sneaking out, just shit like that, like more so trouble with my parents or my family. I got my first DUI when I was 16. And so that's kind of where everything went bad, because that's the first time I was really in trouble, so to speak, because that what came with that was, probation, all that. So leading up to that, that was around the time I was using pretty heavily. I started off, kind of starting to use cocaine again, and then I got into meth my junior and senior year of high school. I did it on accident. I, again, was with older friends who I would, party with and do drugs with. I got a pipe handed to me in a seedy hotel room and smoked it and was higher than a fucking kite and was told that was crystal meth. So the meth thing lasted for about 6 months. I started selling things, my iPods, watches, stuff like that, in order to get money to pay for it. Lost jobs, lost friends. One day, my mom's best friend, who was chief of police in Reno, showed up to her house, and apparently my name had been put on a list of people that were going to go down in a big drug bust, and he scared the living fuck out of me and told me, don't ever do meth again, and I will get your name off of that list. And that was kind of enough to really scare me for the first time, for the amount of trouble I could have gotten in for that. So I kept partying, I bounced from kind of drug to drug, which led to getting the DUI while I was still in high school. So I got my first DUI at 16. I was put on juvenile probation because I was obviously a minor. I went to court for it, and I ended up not getting charged with it till I was about 17. So there was like a whole year of back and forth, with attorneys and all that, where my parents tried to get me out of it. So what happened was I got charged with the DUI at 17, and then I turned 18 shortly after, and something in my head made me think that I was I wouldn't have to, do the juvenile probation because I wasn't a juvenile anymore. So at that point in time, I moved out of my mom's house, started college, and just completely spiraled downhill with drugs and alcohol really bad. So I got a phone call from my probation officer one day saying, you haven't checked in once for probation, and you need to come in immediately and see me. So I was just coming off a bender. I showed up to his office. He drug tested me and I failed. And when he was arresting me, he found a bag full of ecstasy pills as well as cocaine in my bag. This is the first time I went to jail. I went to jail. I detoxed in jail, which wasn't fun. Since I was in there for a probation violation, I couldn't be bailed out, and we had no idea how long I was going to be in there for. It was absolutely terrifying being 18 years old in jail, for drug charges. I got out of jail about 2 weeks later and was put on house arrest. Again, I don't know what was going through my head, but I left the state with my drug dealer, went up to Idaho to do a big pickup with him. Got in huge trouble for that as well. Came home, immediately got arrested again, back in jail. And that was kind of just how things went for a while. I was put on house arrest and a scram bracelet for a few months through college. So basically I was kind of forced to go to school at that point in time. And then the second I got that bracelet off, I basically disappeared from my family, and I, started hanging around really bad people. I ended up homeless because we got kicked out of our house for throwing parties. It was actually technically someone else's house I was staying in. Ended up homeless. I was living in a car with a friend for a couple months. Didn't really have anywhere to go. We were, just basically doing drugs all the time, rarely eating. And then it got to the point where I completely, ran out of everything. Just ran out of juice, ran out of money, everything. And I called my mom and begged her to come home. And I think I was a sophomore in college at this point in time. Begged my mom to come home. She let me come home. We kind of started to rebuild our relationship a little bit. Right around that point in time, my best friend passed away in college. We were drinking and he fell down a flight of stairs and busted his head open. And that weighed really, really heavily on me because I had never had a friend at that point in time. I hadn't had a friend die or OD, from drugs or alcohol or anything yet. So that was kind of the first time something like that had happened to me. And that was another downward spiral of drinking and using. Basically, that stuff kind of continued. I got my second DUI in college at 19, kind of right around that time. Nevada doesn't fuck around with second DUIs. I got in pretty big trouble for that one. Again, it was one of those things where I was on probation. I would have to go breathalyze. I would fail breathalyzer sometimes and get stuck in jail for a couple days at a time. It just, nothing ever changed. So fast forward, I got cleaned up for a little bit, and then I met, when I was about 20, I met an older guy who dealt drugs, and a lot of you guys know that I got into a motorcycle accident, and that was when I was dating him. I was drunk at the time. I thought the motorcycle accident was going to be something that cleaned me up, but if anything, it excused me from work and excused me from school, and I just went back to, using and partying and drinking almost every single day, especially since at that point in time I was with a wealthier, older guy who basically had all the drugs we wanted anytime we want. So that was, another point in time where things kind of spiraled downhill. After that motorcycle accident, the pain, that's when kind of all the pain pill issues started up. Him and I ended up breaking up. He moved away. And then at that point in time, I quit doing drugs. I got into bodybuilding. That's when I tried to get into bodybuilding for the first time, thinking that that would help with my sobriety. For me with bodybuilding, it was just kind of replacing one addiction with another. And I was extreme with it, the starvation and all that. And so let's see, this was when I was about 20. I got my third DUI that same year. And at that point in time, I was just drinking. I wasn't using anymore. Got my third DUI. That's the one I got in a lot of trouble for. Jail time and strict house arrest, scram bracelet, everything like that. I was forced to be sober for those couple months, which is the only reason I got sober. It was basically court ordered. It was that or go to prison for 3 years. So that was probably one of the longest I stayed clean, was around that point in time. Then I met Mike. I stayed clean for the whole 2 years. Him and I were together because he did not condone drug use at all whatsoever, but we definitely drank a lot. The day him and I broke up is where everything basically immediately went to complete shit until I got sober, and that was about a 3-year period. We broke up. I moved out into my own place with people who like to party, and basically from, I think that was 2010, from about 2010 to 2013, I probably did drugs every single day for about 3 years. Molly, ecstasy, heroin, cocaine, everything. I mean, I would change who I hung out with basically based off who I could get free drugs from. Dated a tattoo artist who was really heavily into drugs, and that ended poorly. And then around Thanksgiving I want to say it was 2010, my liver failed, and I got put on liver dialysis because my liver was failing, and we found out that the combination of the motorcycle accident, which tore my liver open and caused a lot of scarring, that my liver functionality was only about 30%. So that was another time where I was basically medically forced to not use or drink. The second I got cleared from the hospital, I went straight back to the drinking and the using again. And it was around that time. I'm sure a lot of you guys have kind of seen the pictures of me when I was about 110 pounds, and that was around then. A lot of you guys have seen the transformation picture of me like facing the lake. A lot of you guys have seen pictures from like the raves I used to go to, EDC and all that. I was about 110 pounds. So basically at that point in time, I was never not fucked up, and when I was sober is when I would act weird and people would ask me if I was using again. I kind of turned into a closet user because I ran out of friends really fast, and I was, doing blow alone in my room every single night. My roommates kicked me out because they tried to talk to me, and I wanted nothing to do with it, so they kicked me out. So I moved into my own place. And right around that time is when I made the decision to marry a fellow addict, alcoholic. And that was also a very toxic relationship, but he was in the military, and he left. And so basically I lied to him the whole time he was gone to get his military funding. So he would send me checks each month of his military money that he got for being married, and it would all go straight to drugs. And the whole time he was gone, I led him to believe that I was sober and doing well and taking care of myself. That was right around the time Ryan and I became good friends, and I definitely tried to have everybody fooled about my drug use. It was always obvious I had a drinking problem because I was always drinking, but I tried to keep the drug use hidden because a lot of my close friends know about my health problems and know that I have liver disease. So it was a really hard time because I was very alone. Because I was, hiding everything. When it used to be, I used to party with friends, with people, and you kind of like share that pain with people, fellow addicts. Even if you're in denial, it's somebody to go through it with. But at this point in time, I was, very alone. Then it even got to the point where I, started selling stuff, started stealing money from my family. For the whole time of my addiction problems, I would, write checks to myself from my parents. I racked up close to about 50 grand in fraudulent checks from both of them, which thankfully I'm at the point now where I've been able to pay them back. But yeah, so safe to say my relationship with him definitely ended. And, I kind of looked at my life and looked at how dishonest I was being. And it was kind of right around the time things were taking off for me here in Reno. And I basically had two options: stay in Reno and eventually die, or move to Southern California. So I moved to Southern California. Basically, when I left Reno, a lot of the drug use stopped. I cut off contacts with everybody. It was a really rough, first month stopping all the drug use. But getting down to Southern California, I became very insecure. I was constantly around a lot of very attractive, fit, good-looking people. And when I first got down there, I was very, very thin and frail. And so, working at Rise Above Fitness, I decided I, needed to put weight on. I wanted to get healthy. The drinking didn't stop. And not a lot of my friends on there drank. So it turned into me, closet drinking a bottle of whiskey a night in my own room, crying. And then that kind of went on for basically the whole time I lived down there. I think I was down there for about a year before I got sober, because I got sober May 13th or May 28th of 2013. Basically, when the drug use started back up again down there, after I thought it was something I had quit, that's when I, knew there were issues. So I kind of turned into that person that constantly said, I'm sober. And that would last 2 weeks. And then I'd be using and drinking again, and went through that kind of vicious circle. Basically, the drug use and the drinking got really bad again the week before Memorial Day weekend. And I went on about a 7-day bender down there, drugs, alcohol, everything, to the point where I ended up in the hospital, and I went through alcohol withdrawals and was having alcohol-induced seizures. And the doctor, I was 23 at the time, or 24. The doctor basically told me that, what I was going through was things that he sees happen to alcoholics in their 60s and 70s, not in their early 20s. And he told me that if I kept drinking, that I was going to die. And my liver damage, it's even though our livers repair ourselves, I have scarring, and there's not really a lot of coming back from that. And he told me I was going to die of liver failure soon if I didn't quit drinking. So basically, I went to an AA meeting the day after I got out of the hospital, and then with my buddy Alex Minsky. A lot of you guys know who that is. And I went to another one and another one and another one, and I went every single day for 30 days. And 30 days is the longest I had ever gone since I was 13 without drinking or using. And just everything started to change. And I just kept going back, and I just took everything one day at a time. I moved away from Southern California, which was a toxic environment for me, and I moved to New York with people who cared about me, and people who were going to make sure, I stayed sober and help me. And so we packed up our shit. Ryan came with me, Ryan, and Matthew moved to New York. And then it was just kind of like one day at a time after that. I don't know. It's a lot to talk about all at once and to keep it concise. I mean, I've been homeless. I've been addicted to just about everything. I've stolen from my family, from my friends. I've lied to people's faces. I got jumped and beat to shit multiple times by drug dealers who knew I had a rich dad when my dad was still, financially funding me. I've OD'd multiple times. I kind of went through it all, and sometimes I think back and I can't believe it took me 10 years to figure out that I need to get sober. And it's not something, that just happened. I would go through, a lot of people say, well, when did you hit rock bottom? I've probably hit rock bottom a dozen times, and every time it gets a little bit worse. But every time it's unique in its own way. And I would do something to try to make a change, or at least do something to make people believe me that I was going to change. And, I'd stick to it for a week, and then it'd be right back to where I was. because addiction is just a nasty thing, the way it grabs a hold of you. And I can definitely say that, alcohol's not, or drugs aren't the only thing I've been addicted to. I've gone through sex addiction. I've gone through gambling addiction. Everything, you name it. And I've probably been addicted to it. And, that's just something I try to keep in mind right now. And I think a lot of people, know that lifting helped me with my sobriety a lot. But for a point in time, I got very addicted to training and lifting, and I was not taking good care of myself. And I based my self-worth off my body fat percentage or my numbers in the gym. And that's also no way to live at all whatsoever. That's not how, you determine your self-worth. So, yeah, I mean, it was not easy, but I had the right people in place to help me. And, I'd be lying if I said that I don't think about drinking at least once a day. Every single day I think about drinking or using. And that's never going to go away. I just learned how to better manage that. And a lot of you guys know my boyfriend's bipolar, and he kind of made the analogy that he's bipolar and manic depressive. And every day, he said he thinks about, he contemplates suicide, not necessarily about killing himself, but that's just part of, his makeup. And that's when I kind of, better understood him. Is every day I think about drinking and I think about using in some capacity, but I'm not necessarily saying like, oh, I'm going to go get fucked up or anything like that. And it's just something you learn how to deal with, and you learn how different ways to think about it. And for me, there's days where life would be a lot easier if I could just, go drink, or more fun if I could go drink. And there's certain situations that I'm in sometimes where it sucks to be sober, lake days, everyone's having a beer or two. But as an addict and alcoholic, I can't just have a beer or two, If I'm having a beer, I'm having 30 beers and going on a 7-day bender. And that's just how, I'm wired. And I'm wired differently than somebody who's not an alcoholic or not an addict. And that goes for anybody who's an addict or alcoholic. A lot of people had questions that I scrolled back through to find, so I'm going to go back through and read them. I'm going to keep them anonymous of who asked them. Someone said, at the beginning of sobriety, you're faced with a lot of loss of something you've loved, feeling numb, loss of your friends, loss of your social life. How did you cope with that at first, and how did that change for you over time? What I lost when I got sober, I felt like I lost my personality because I had spent so long drinking and using that I was drunk Krissy or high Krissy. I was that 90% of the time, and I didn't know how to be sober, and I didn't even know who I was. And all the times I quit using, I was a certain person when I was on drugs, and I wasn't that person anymore when I was sober. And since I had spent so little time with my sober self, I knew nothing about myself, and it was absolutely terrifying. And that's kind of what I lost right at first, is I lost my old self, which was the only self I knew at the time. And I felt very lonely and scared, and that I didn't know how to be, and I didn't know who I was. And that's what was very scary for me. Someone asked about fitness being a great alternative, but cravings can still happen. How do you stop yourself from saying, I've got 3 years of sobriety, I obviously have proven I can handle this, I can enjoy a few drinks now and then and be fine? I think about that every single day. I'm not the person I was when I was, 16 to 24, 14 to 24. And to this day, I don't know if I could handle a beer or two or a drink or two. There's obviously times when we're celebrating something and there's champagne passed around, and I think to myself, like, oh, I could just have half a glass of champagne, but I don't think I could. I think for me, it would be one of those situations where I just kept drinking because I did it while I drank. I would have one shot and say, oh, I'm fine, I'm not drunk. 2 shots, 3 shots, 4 shots, and the next thing you know, I'm half a bottle in and still trying to convince myself I'm not drunk and that I'm handling it fine, when that was hardly the case. So yeah, I think about that every day. There's times when I think about if I ever get married again, and am I going to be able to have a glass of champagne at my wedding? And I just think for me, it's an all or nothing thing. It's the one thing I've never been able to balance is definitely drinking in any capacity. Or, I mean, I can't recreationally use drugs. Like, for me, it was, a lot more than that. Some more questions people have. What's your advice for people who are struggling? If you're struggling, fucking talk about it, man. I mean, the worst thing you can do is keep it all in. It just builds up more anxieties and stresses you out. And I mean, whenever I'm having a really hard time, I mean, I'm not as involved in AA as I used to, which I'll go into here shortly. But if I'm having a hard time, I go sit in a room full of people who are just fucking like me. I sit down in a room full of addicts or alcoholics and remind myself that I'm not alone, because there's nothing unique about being an addict or an alcoholic. It's something millions of people struggle with, but although everyone's experiences and situations and levels of it are unique, it doesn't matter. There was times when I went to AA and there was people in the room who had only drank for a year and gotten sober. I drank for 10. And even though my experiences with alcoholism were longer than theirs, they still are wired the same as I am. And I think there's something to be learned from other alcoholics, no matter how many years sober they have or what their experiences are. Like, you're not alone. And if you're struggling, I think the best thing you can do is talk to somebody about it and vent, get stuff off your chest, let someone know how you're feeling, and just never be afraid to be judged. Make sure you have the right people in your life. Someone asked, what are your feelings on weed? Do you consider remaining sober if someone aids in abstaining for alcohol when they also suffer from depression, anxiety? I'm a huge, huge, huge advocate of marijuana for medicinal purposes. It personally does nothing for me. I think I only ever smoked weed probably 3 times in my whole life. So that's not my thing. I've had a lot of people suggest it to me for my insomnia, but I know people who have anxiety, bipolar, all types of, mental illness, that marijuana helps them tremendously. And I think as long as you're not using it to get fucked up, I absolutely would say you're still sober. Now, AA and NA wouldn't say you're still sober, but again, you can't let these organizations define your sobriety for you. It's completely up to you and what you consider sober. It's the same as if you have fucking back pain and you have a prescription to pain pills and you take one to manage your back pain, stuff like that. I mean, there's people who would say that that's not sobriety, but as long as you're not taking any drugs to get fucked up or to get high, I definitely think that marijuana can be incredibly helpful for things like anxiety and depression. Next question. Addressing struggles, misgivings, apprehensions, etc. you had with the religious component of AA and NA. So, I am a devout atheist. That does not mean I hate religion. It just means I don't believe that there is life after death. I don't believe in any one single God. That's just my personal belief, and that's completely fine for you to believe otherwise. AA really, really, really stresses the notion of God. And I know that they refer it to your higher power, but it's very religious based, and to more people, it's more about religion than it is spirituality. When you go to AA meetings, people are talking about the Christian God for the most part. So that is, I'll tell you right now, I've never worked the steps. I've had a sponsor a couple different times, and I've started to work the steps. I've worked the steps in my own way personally. I've taken a catalog of everything I've done wrong to people. I've apologized to people I've harmed. I've, admitted certain things about myself, and that's a lot of, what I've learned about the steps and being in AA. But part of the reason why I never dove in head first to the program is because I can't personally get behind the religious component. To other people, that's what saves them. So again, it's completely up to you. This person says, I'm going to pass that question. As far as family members that are struggling, there's Al-Anon meetings that you can go to that help you personally, and you'll be in a group with people who have a significant other, family member, or relative who is an addict, alcoholic, and that's kind of a support group for family, which is really helpful. Again, it's putting yourself in a room full of people that know what you're going through and can sympathize and empathize for what you're going through. Always let an addict or an alcoholic, know who you're close with, that you're there for them and let them know they're not alone. And you can't force somebody to want to change, or you can't force anyone to want to get sober. That's their own, back to the, I'll make a religious reference, the come to Jesus moment when you realize, that they need to make a change, but you can't force that change upon them. And just letting them know you're there for them. People say that, alcoholism, about being an addict, alcoholic, that you're in denial, but I don't think I was ever in denial about it. I think there was times when I was in denial about how bad my problem was, but I was well aware, especially when I was, coming down from whatever drug or whatever, that I had a drinking and a drug problem. And so you just need to be supportive in any way you can, but there will come a point where you can't do anything anymore, and you definitely can't enable someone. And that's where things get really hard. And my mom had to come to that point a couple of times where she couldn't enable me anymore, and I was hurting her too much. And it was at that point in time I was going to hurt myself no matter what. And I think my mom kind of it was very hurtful for her, but she had to realize that it was better for me to just hurt than for me and her to hurt. And there was a couple of times where she just had to walk away and wait for me to come back to her. And my addiction tore my entire family apart multiple times. And I'm very thankful that I have the relationship I have with my parents now. They've been nothing but supportive and forgiving and loving to me through this whole thing. And I think that I can honestly say my mom's played a huge role in my sobriety. And when I have those thoughts of wanting to drink or use, I think about how my mom would feel, and she would be completely heartbroken, and that's enough for me to stay sober right there. So, family's everything. And if you're not close with your blood family, you make a new family of your friends and the people you care about the most. This person's question is, was there anything that this is what we just talked about, anything that your family, friends were able to do to support and encourage your sobriety? My mom did everything she possibly could, emotionally, mentally, physically, everything. And then she wasn't with me when I got sober down in Southern California, so she couldn't be present. But some of my closest friends went to meetings with me every day, and they kind of made a plan with themselves. And one of them took Tuesdays, one of them took Wednesdays. And what they did was they had a schedule to make sure that someone could go to a meeting with me every day to make sure I went. And then the other thing they did is they planned activities on the weekends that didn't involve drinking. We would go to the Sky High trampoline gym or just shit like that. And they would plan ahead for the weekend to make sure that I was staying busy and doing things that would prevent me from drinking. And at that point in time, it was really annoying. But when I look back now, I'm, super grateful that they did that, because had they not, I might not have stayed sober. Again, this person is just asking about family members. My question is, when and where was the moment that you finally found the motivation within yourself to seek treatment and commit to it? Obviously, getting out of the hospital was a huge day for me. That's when I, realized having the seizures was absolutely terrifying. There was a couple other times with my family when I was, heavily involved in drugs when I was still living in Reno. When I called my mom and begged her to come home, that was a big rock bottom moment. And I remember I got home that day and I hadn't seen my sister for a while. And I looked like I had, died and come back from the dead. I remember sitting down in my mom's kitchen and I ate a bowl of cereal and my sister hugged me. Maria was probably 10 at the time, 11. And I said, "Why are you hugging me?" And she told me she couldn't remember the last time she'd seen me eat. And I broke down. Having your baby sister say something like that to you, that was, one of the times where I really wanted to make a change. And my mom offered to get me help. And I was seeing a psychiatrist, and we put me on antidepressants and all that stuff. But it obviously didn't last long. But it was little moments like that that I was just hurting so bad that I wanted to get better for my family and the people who cared about me. This is more questions about getting sober. This person says that they have 18 months sober and regress at that stage. I think the hardest part of my sobriety was the year mark to the 18-month mark, those 6 months, I remember you hit that year of sobriety and, you feel like you can do anything and that you're going to be able to, stay sober forever. But then you kind of start to realize, well, I did this for a year. Maybe I don't have a drinking problem. And I think once you've spent a year with yourself sober, you really start to figure out who you are as a person. And I was not a good person. And I think I started to realize that about a year into my sobriety, which is right around the time I met my boyfriend. He went to my 1-year meeting with me when we first started dating. And after you spend a year with yourself and you kind of like learn who you are while you're not chemically impaired, it shows a lot about yourself. And those 6 months were really hard because I hated myself. And, I was dishonest and I was insecure and I was scared of everything. And I think that was easily the hardest part of my sobriety. And I had to go through, a lot in my second year of sobriety and face myself a lot more and, admit to more faults and really focus on getting better, because I've talked about this, on Mark Bell's podcast before. Even though I was sober from drugs and alcohol my first year of sobriety, I wasn't living a sober life. And again, it came down to the lying and the dishonesty and the still being a bad person in my relationships and my friendships, because I didn't know how to be otherwise. And so that's one thing you really need to learn is when you spend such a long time drinking and using, and if you're drinking and using a majority of your time, when you go to being sober 100% of the time, it's a completely different life change. You have to start handling your problems like an adult. You have to start talking about things with people. You can't just go get drunk and get fucked up and be shitty. This is again about family stuff. We already talked about that. I think basically just kind of most of the questions people have is about getting sober and staying sober. And I mean, it just comes down to finding what works for you. It doesn't have to be AA and it doesn't have to be NA. There's other types of group therapy. You can, there's sober people everywhere. I know most people aren't as open to talking about it as I am, but it's stuff like this where, I've made a post on Instagram talking about my sobriety, and there'll be 200 comments of people that are sober. And it's just crazy for me to think that there's that many of us out there. And, you start putting those feelers out and connecting that way, and just, don't be ashamed of it. Don't be afraid of it. Anybody who's going to judge you for being a recovering addict or alcoholic isn't someone you want in your life anyway. So, if you put yourself out there, other addicts and alcoholics, we all kind of magnetize to each other. I've noticed, and I think the best thing you can do is to surround yourself with like-minded people. And, that's true in any aspect of life, whether it's, with your training or with your job or anything like that. The second you surround yourself with people who understand you, it's really motivating and incredibly supportive. So, in Reno, I don't have a ton of sober friends, and I'm not as active in the AA community as I would like to be. But what I do want to do is start a sobriety group at the gym. As a lot of you know, I'm implementing a program where we give free memberships to anybody who has less than a year of recovery under their belt, to help people stay sober through fitness, and not even necessarily through lifting in the gym, but just being around a positive environment in general. I mean, I don't even care if you lift weights. You can come here and fucking hang out if you want to, if it's going to help you stay sober. And then, hopefully by next year we'll have the nonprofit up and running so we can start implementing stuff like this across the nation and not just here in my own gym. So what are we at for time total?
About 45 minutes.
45 minutes of me talking about myself. So yeah, I mean, I just basically wanted to share what I've gone through with you guys. I did it as brief as possible. I didn't want to get into, telling too many detailed stories. There's a lot of stuff I'm still very ashamed of that I've done for drugs in the past. And, that takes time for me to want to share with people. But I just think that letting everybody know, what I've gone through and, kind of just the timeline for things, and it's crazy how when you spend 10 years impaired, for lack of a better word. Like, you know, the ratio is insane to me. Like what I've done in the past 3, you know, I started donuts and deadlifts. I moved to New York City. I opened a gym. You know, the list goes on, and it's just been really cool to see what's happened. And I would have none of this if I was still getting loaded. I mean, I wouldn't have any of this if I was still drinking on the weekends, because when I drink on the weekends, it would carry into Monday, Tuesday, and I'd start drinking again Thursday night, you know. So for me, it's an all or nothing thing. I don't judge anybody who still uses. I have a lot of friends that still like to party, and that's fine. You know, if you guys follow me on Snapchat or anything like that, you see that I still go out a lot. I'm around alcohol a lot. I can handle it. You know, there's never been a temptation. There's never been like a close call, so to speak. It's been pretty smooth sailing the past couple months, which has been nice. But again, little things can throw me off, and it still happens all the time. But I guess my biggest suggestion to anybody who is struggling with this and you're not yet sober is, you know, make a fucking list of pros and cons, and, you know, make a list of the good that drinking does you and what you like about it or using, and make a list of the bads. And if you've ever lost a job because of alcohol or drugs, or you've ever had to end a relationship because of it, I think that's a really big indicator that you need help, and that that you might not be able to handle your drinking, your using as well as you thought. So I want everybody to know that I am completely available to talk to anybody at any time. You can DM me on Instagram. You can shoot me a Facebook message. You can shoot me an email. Be patient with me in my replies, as I get a lot every single day. But if you're hurting and you need advice, or you just need someone to tell you it's going to be okay, that's all I care about. And that's what I'm here for 100% of the time. And you can reach out to me on any social media platform. You can walk into my gym and ask for me if you want to. I'm definitely, my biggest passion is helping people stay sober at this point in time. So thanks for listening. I hope this motivated some people. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.